most perceptive columnist in America today, Bret Stephens of the New York Times. Bret, welcome. Your latest column, Susan Rice was a diplomatic disaster, would have been the subject of our conversation had she been selected. I talked to President Trump at length about it on Tuesday. Joe Biden wisely diverted from that course. Do you think that was ever a realistic possibility?
My understanding was that she was on the short list. So, yeah, I think it was a very real possibility.
I am hoping that she does not return to the inner circle of the administration at all if Joe Biden wins. I just think you're right. It's just a diplomatic disaster. Tell me what you think about the choice of Kamala Harris.
Well, from a tactical point of view, I don't think it was the best choice that he could have made. You now have a ticket with two people who, to most Americans, represent coastal elites. Joe Biden has been a fixture of Washington since before I was born, since 1972, and Harris is a West Coast liberal. So, I think it's safe to say the Biden ticket is going to take California, but the states that are going to need to win are Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. States where I think Harris's brand of politics won't go over quite as well. So, if I had been in Joe Biden's shoes, I might have thought of someone like Val Demings or Tammy Duckworth, someone who could really have helped him. I think this was a choice from a high degree of confidence that he was going to win this race. And I think, as Hillary Clinton showed 4 years ago, overconfidence against Donald Trump is usually misplaced.
I believe they made this for the same reason Donald Trump picked Mike Pence. Mike Pence is to the conservative movement what Kamala Harris is to the left-wing movement. They are comforters. They are reassurances. Because I described Senator Harris, and I've observed her for very close up for years when I lived in California, smart, tough left. And smart, tough left means that she gets the Democratic base reassured as to the direction of the administration in the same way that Mike Pence reassured evangelicals. At that point, it's over. They don't matter. I don't think Pence and Kamala Harris matter unless politics has changed significantly. Has it, Bret? Is it still Biden-Trump?
Look, I don't know. I think they matter. The choice matters more in this cycle than others because of questions about Joe Biden's longevity, his health. Obviously, I wish him long life and good health. But I think this choice is more significant than it had been in the past. And one point that I think is worth mentioning, Hugh, is that people forget Harris performed dismally in the Democratic primary. She didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus. Never mind the New Hampshire primary. So her political skills aren't as strong as I think people make them out to be. We'll see if they've improved, and we'll see how well she does in the debate against Pence. But look, as choices go, I can think of worse choices that Biden could have made. So
Yeah, Susan Rice being the worst choice I could have possibly imagined. So going forward, do you expect the debates to happen, Bret Stephens?
Yes, I do. I expect them to happen. Look, Biden actually, especially in his last debate with Bernie Sanders, performed, perfectly well. The Trump campaign is going to obviously raise questions about Biden's mental fitness, and ducking the debates, I think, is only going to sort of make those questions more pointed. So my suspicion is they will happen. They've happened in every presidential contest since as long as I can remember, so they'll happen again.
And I asked the president on Tuesday if the expectations were purposely being lowered for Joe Biden. He said yes. If he gets through the hour, they'll declare him the winner. Objectively, I think that's true, Bret. The expectations are being ratcheted down for the vice president because his basement campaign has been erratic, to use one word. It's just been uneven, to use another word. How would you describe the basement campaign?
Well, erratic and uneven, I guess. But on the other hand, low key and out of the way, and that has been his style. I would caution Trump also against overconfidence. I don't think Trump is a particularly sharp debater. He had the benefit of opposing a candidate in 2016 who really rubbed people the wrong way and who adopted a posture of overconfidence and arrogance and dismissiveness that had been, her calling card for many years and wound up really not helping her. Biden can actually benefit in this sense. I'm reminded a little bit of the Bush-Gore debates where everyone said that Gore was just going to wipe the floor with a slightly, a mentally not very nimble Bush. That image of Bush was always, phony. He's, a much sharper guy than people gave him credit for. But remember, being the underdog or being perceived to have some kind of mental handicap can win a lot of sympathy in a debate.
Oh, I am old enough to remember. I was in the administration being scared to death of the second Reagan-Mondale debate. Because in the first Reagan-Mondale debate, President Reagan had gone down Route 1 in some kind of a rhetorical, misty-eyed memory of California. And people were wondering whether he'd lost it. And he showed up and he just clobbered Mondale in debate number 2. And that was over. Let's get to the question.
I'm old enough to remember that, too. I will not use my opponent's age of youth and inexperience against him.
It was, and Joe Biden might pull the same kind of thing. On Tuesday, I asked President Trump about a comment that Robert O'Brien made to Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation. The Chinese want Joe Biden to win. And he emphasized that. I believe that also be the case. What do you think, Bret Stephens?
I'm not sure that's true at all. And if you look at the overall record, Trump's overall record of China, it's erratic to the point of schizophrenia. There have been periods of extreme obsequiousness when it came to Xi Jinping, and then periods of conflict and I don't know if truculence is the right word. In the last 2 or 3 months, the administration has rolled out a number of speeches from O'Brien, from Christopher Wray, the FBI director, Bill Barr, and Mike Pompeo. They've been very clear-eyed, very, very tough on China. But remember, this is the president who promised fire and fury against North Korea and ended up being Kim Jong-un's best friend. I think there's, this is one area, Hugh, where I see a kind of a growing American consensus, both on the left and the right, a left that is disgusted by China because of its actions in Xinjiang against Muslim Uyghurs or in Hong Kong against protesters, a right that sees the national security threat of China. I think you're actually seeing the possibility of one area where Americans on both sides of the divide can agree that China poses a fundamental strategic threat to American interests and to the interests of our allies. You might get, in fact, something approaching coherent bipartisan foreign policy, whether it's a Biden administration or a Trump one.
I agree with that consensus forming. I was with Secretary Pompeo when he made his speech at the Nixon Library and asked the follow-up questions. What was interesting to me, Bret, he said, we're not calling for containment. We're calling for something different. Well, that's not regime change, but it's something between containment and regime change. And I believe it is, he called for an alliance of the free world against things like Huawei and WeChat and TikTok. In essence, economic isolation is, I think, what the bottom line is, not war, but jaw, and tariff. Will the rest of the world go along with that? Australia, Great Britain, Japan, they've already signed on, South Korea, but Canada hasn't even agreed to get rid of Huawei yet.
Well, look, I'm not sure that, the train has left the station in terms of economic isolation of China. This is not the Soviet Union that basically self-isolated in many ways during the Bolshevik, the 70 years of the communist regime. What I heard Pompeo call for is something like a NATO with Beijing as the object of resistance as opposed to Moscow. And I don't think that's a bad idea, because the China that most needs to be resisted isn't China making goods for in the global supply chain. It's the China that is claiming the South China Sea for itself, that is expanding its frontier against India. It's the China that is trying to encroach in the Middle East and in Africa, and it's the China that is increasingly a malevolent actor on the world stage, especially when it comes to the theft of intellectual property. So, numbering the many, many billions of dollars, and that's where I think the alliance needs to come around. I think that countries that are considering, bringing Huawei into their national infrastructure have to be made to rethink that. And I think there has to be a consensus that until China ceases to be a revisionist actor in its region and a force for instability in the world, it's going to be resisted. And I think the administration is, at least the speech that you helped moderate with Pompeo, Christopher Wray's speech was even more eye-opening, I thought. I think that actually can serve as the basis for some global movement. It's going to take time because we live even now in a globally interconnected world, and you can't just take the China piece out of it without huge amounts of disruption. But you can enforce very tough penalties against the way in which the Chinese act on the global stage, above all on the intellectual property front.
Interestingly enough, there are two key gaps in a new NATO or a ASEAN that actually mattered. One is the Philippines, which is simply not reliable. And the second one, well, I'll come back. Let me ask you about the Philippines. I'm not an expert on the Philippines. I've never set foot there. They should be our most reliable ally, and they're not.
Well, this has everything to do with the personality and the politics of a particularly dreadful president in the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, who, whose early calling card was vigilante justice in the streets of Manila and elsewhere. The Philippines has always been pro-American. I consider that Duterte attempted to go up the regime to be an aberration in Filipino politics. I hope it is.
And hope for a reversion to the norm. That's what I hope for.
To the Aquino model, yeah.
Now, the last thing is a United States Navy adequate to the challenge. Donald Trump campaigned on 355 ships. He's been slow-rolled by the Pentagon. That we're barely at 300, Bret. It seems to me, I hope that consensus you're talking about, whether it's Biden or Trump, that we get serious about the Navy in the next 10 years.
Well, that's what worries me a great deal, which is defense spending. And I wrote about this the other day. In some ways, the fire at the Houston consulate, the Chinese putting, the Chinese diplomats setting their records on fire, and the fire of the USS Bonhomme Richard are, in that sense, connected. We may be, headed towards a confrontation without the necessary means. We need a much stronger Navy than we have, and a lot of this isn't simply on the appropriators in Washington. The Navy has its own share of major mistakes in the last few years. Two U.S. destroyers that couldn't get their navigation right, leading to ruinous loss of life. A series of procurement disasters, the LCS, the littoral combat ship being a very good case in point, an aircraft carrier that can't get its elevators working. So something has to happen also in Navy culture. And
I hope you write about that, Bret, because you're absolutely right. Bret,